My name is Daniel Mercer, 59 years old, and until 15 minutes ago, I was the Senior Systems Administrator at Greenridge Regional Medical Center in Boulder, Colorado. 15 years spent building and maintaining the digital heartbeat of a 250-bed hospital erased in a 20-minute meeting. Across from me sat Kevin Laird, the new Chief Operating Officer, only 41 years old and armed with an MBA from somewhere flashy. No medical background, no history here, just a clipboard and a mandate to modernize operations. His consultant, a kid named Trent, leaned against the window, scrolling through his phone, already half checked out of the conversation. "We're moving toward cloud-based architecture," Kevin said briskly, sliding a folder across the table. "Thank you for your years of service. Here's your severance, 2 months of salary, standard NDA." I nodded, the weight of my hospital ID badge feeling heavier than ever. 15 years, no system downtime. Not during the massive ransomware attack of 2018, not even during the rolling blackouts of 2020. Nights spent sleeping under my desk during critical software upgrades. Christmases and Thanksgivings sacrificed to emergency patches. The security team waited at the door to escort me out. Kevin didn't even stand when I unclipped my badge and placed it carefully on the table. "Master passwords are in the encrypted archive," I said quietly. Kevin smiled, relieved. "Glad you're being reasonable. Daniel, change is always difficult, but it's necessary." I glanced at Trent, barely 30 years old, already stepping forward to claim the desk. I had once fought tooth and nail to defend from cyber attacks, hardware failures, and legislative audits. He hadn't asked me a single meaningful question during his 3-week evaluation. "Anything else you'd like to add?" Kevin asked, checking his watch. I could have told them about the custom code patches I'd built to integrate their outdated pharmacy system with modern patient records. I could have warned them about the legacy radiology systems that didn't speak modern protocols and needed manual routing scripts to function. Instead, I simply shook my head. No, nothing else. Walking out past the oncology nurses who used to bring me coffee during late-night server maintenance. Past the ER scheduling desk where I once rebuilt the entire database. After a corruption crash, I felt a dull ache settle in my chest. They didn't want my experience. They wanted my absence. In the parking lot, I slid into my old pickup truck, setting the cardboard box of family photos and a worn-out Greenridge hoodie beside me. I turned the key without looking back. They thought they could replace 15 years of blood, sweat, and institutional knowledge with a newer model and a cloud subscription. They would learn soon enough. And when they did, I wouldn't be waiting by the phone. The first call came 2 days later. Alan from IT, sounding unusually nervous, left a voicemail. "Hey Daniel, just a quick question. Could you remind me where the backup credentials for the surgical scheduling system are stored? We're having a little trouble accessing it." I didn't return the call. By the end of that afternoon, I had 7 missed calls and 4 text messages, each more desperate than the last. Denise, the database administrator, was next. "Where's the configuration manual for the pharmacy bridge system? I can't find it in the shared drive." It wasn't surprising. The shared drive had only been a skeleton, a sanitized version of the real documentation I kept on a separate secure archive. Fully updated and cross-referenced. The one no one ever bothered to ask about during their rushed transition planning. On the 3rd day, Greenridge's ER system crashed. An old colleague, Dr. Megan Ellis, called me from her personal phone. Her voice was tight, controlled. We had a multi-car pileup on I-25. Half the patient files wouldn't load, allergy histories, medications, prior surgeries gone. How bad, I asked, knowing I shouldn't even be having the conversation. "No fatalities," she said, but it was close. I closed my eyes, pressing the heel of my hand against my forehead. They hadn't just replaced a few servers. They had ripped out the nervous system of the hospital without understanding how the body still depended on it. Greenridge wasn't built like a new hospital. Over 15 years, it had become a tangled network of customized software-patched hardware and critical manual overrides stitched together to prioritize one thing above all else: patient care. You couldn't just migrate that to the cloud like uploading vacation photos. Every line of code, every emergency workaround, every undocumented patch, it all lived in the institutional memory they had just erased. It wasn't personal neglect that led to the failure. It was arrogance. By Friday, the calls were coming straight from Kevin Laird himself. The subject lines of his emails grew more urgent by the hour. "Need assistance urgently. Critical system failure, please call. We are willing to renegotiate your consultant terms." I read every word carefully and replied to none of them. My severance agreement was clear: no unauthorized assistance. Violating it would not only forfeit my severance, but expose me to potential legal action. Besides, I had already moved forward. I owed Greenridge nothing more. That night, I sat on my small balcony, sipping coffee as the lights of Boulder flickered in the distance. My laptop sat open beside me, a single email draft blinking on the screen, a formal acceptance of my new position at Pinecrest Health, a mid-sized hospital just 20 miles west, where Jennifer Walsh had promised my experience would be an asset, not a relic. Another text from Dr. Ellis buzzed on my phone. 3 departments offline, board in full panic. Kevin's team doesn't even know how the prescription refill API works. Paper records everywhere. Total chaos. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling neither joy nor triumph, just a profound sadness. 15 years of vigilance invisible because it had worked too well. 15 years of sacrifices measured in missed birthdays. Canceled holidays and silent nights spent battling unseen digital fires. All erased in 20 minutes by people who thought buzzwords were a substitute for understanding. And now the ghost they had tried so hard to erase was haunting them. But this ghost had already found a new home. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and watched the stars slowly carve paths across the night sky. I would not go back. Not for them. Not for anyone. By Monday morning, I had officially accepted the offer from Pinecrest Health. Jennifer Walsh, the director of technology, sounded almost relieved when I called. "Welcome aboard, Daniel," she said warmly. "We're lucky to have you." It wasn't a glamorous role, senior systems architect, but it was a fresh start. A place where experience mattered more than appearances. Meanwhile, Greenridge continued to unravel. The local news picked up the story late that afternoon. A neatly dressed anchorwoman stood in front of Greenridge's glass entrance, reporting live. Sources tell us that Greenridge Regional Medical Center has experienced multiple system outages this week following a major IT restructuring. Patient care has reportedly been impacted, with some departments reverting to paper-based protocols. I sat back in my chair watching the familiar building flash on the screen. The same hallways where I'd once spent countless nights coaxing life back into ancient servers, now reduced to a symbol of failure. That evening, the call shifted from Greenridge staff to Greenridge leadership. First, a text from Kevin Laird. "Daniel, urgent. We need to discuss immediate consulting options." Then an email from Trent, the consultant. "Please reconsider assisting us. We are willing to offer premium consulting rates." They still didn't understand. It wasn't about the money. It was about trust, something they had discarded the moment they chose to believe. That 15 years of experience could be replaced by a few weeks of outsourced evaluations. I deleted the messages without replying. Later that night, Dr. Megan Ellis called again. This time, she didn't bother hiding her frustration. "They can't even restore the backup systems. Daniel, ER admissions are bottlenecked. Lab results delayed. Pharmacy is handwriting prescriptions. Compliance officers are breathing down everyone's neck." I stayed silent, letting her words fill the space between us. "They're scared," she added more softly. "The board's furious. Kevin's blaming the consultants." "The consultants are blaming Kevin. No one knows who's actually in charge anymore." "They wanted a modern system," I said quietly. "They got one." Megan sighed. "They're asking if anyone has your personal contact information. Kevin even approached Dr. Hayden, thinking she might convince you." I shook my head. "I'm already moving forward." And Pinecrest wasn't just offering me a new job. They were offering me something I'd almost forgotten how to expect: respect. On Wednesday, Jennifer invited me to tour Pinecrest's existing infrastructure. She didn't bring a consultant. She didn't wave around buzzwords. Instead, she asked real questions, listened carefully, took notes. Walking through Pinecrest's clean server rooms, reviewing their moderately outdated but carefully maintained systems, I felt something shift inside me. Hope. Katina Anemanam. Here was a place that didn't need a revolution. They needed reinforcement. They needed someone who understood that innovation wasn't about ripping out the old at any cost. It was about building carefully atop what worked, fortifying foundations instead of demolishing them. After the tour, Jennifer handed me a badge, temporary, until the official start date, she said. Still, I turned it over in my hands, feeling the weight of it. Daniel Mercer, Pinecrest Health Systems Architect. Not invisible, not obsolete, not forgotten. As I drove home, the sun dipped low over the Rockies, painting the sky in bands of orange and crimson. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was moving towards something better. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving the next system failure. I was building a future again. The email from Dr. Hayden arrived Thursday morning, tucked between welcome messages from Pinecrest's HR department and a receipt for my new work laptop. Subject off the record. Daniel, is Simran Acer. I thought you'd want to know. There's more going on at Greenridge than just incompetence. Call me if you have a minute. Hannah. Mercer Renabworn. Curiosity tugged at me harder than I expected. Against my better judgment, I called. Hannah answered on the first ring, her voice low and urgent. Daniel, you were right. It wasn't about modernization. I leaned back in my chair. Go on. She hesitated like she wasn't sure how much to reveal. Kevin's been working with a company called Stratagem Technologies for months. The consultants he brought in, they're not just here to upgrade systems. Stratagem offered a deal. If Greenridge migrated fully to their proprietary platform within 6 months, Kevin would get a personal bonus. My stomach tightened. Stratagem Technologies had a reputation not for quality, but for corporate takeovers disguised as tech transitions. They'd gut a hospital's IT system, lock it into expensive vendor contracts, and walk away with tidy profits while patient care suffered. This wasn't about upgrading. I said it was about clearing the way for a corporate acquisition. Yes, Hannah confirmed. And the worst part, the board wasn't told the full truth. They saw a cost-saving initiative. They didn't see the long-term dependency and loss of system control. Pieces fell into place faster than I could process them. The rushed evaluations, the token audits. The way they had downplayed stability issues and framed me as outdated. They needed me out of the way. Not because I couldn't handle modernization, but because I would have recognized the scam for what it was. What about patient care? I asked bitterly. Hannah sighed. Collateral damage. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she added, the board's catching on. Now too late maybe, but some members are furious. They're investigating Stratagem's contracts and Kevin's role in pushing them through. Will they call me in? I asked, half dreading the answer. Maybe Dr. Lewis and Dr. Patel are both demanding a full review. Your name's been coming up a lot. After we hung up, I sat motionless, letting the anger and betrayal settle into something colder, something harder. It wasn't just personal anymore. They hadn't just insulted my years of service. They had endangered patients. They had gambled with lives real, breathing people for the sake of bonuses and quarterly savings projections. I opened my laptop and pulled up my personal archives. Every system design document, every audit report, every compliance certification I had helped the hospital achieve. I hadn't taken those records to gloat. I had kept them to protect myself. Now they might protect Greenridge too. Later that afternoon, a formal invitation landed in my inbox. Subject request for expert testimony, Greenridge Board emergency session. They weren't just asking for my help. They were asking for my voice. Something they should have valued all along. I closed my laptop, feeling the old tension coiling in my shoulders. This wasn't the homecoming I had imagined. But it wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, about integrity, about making sure that the place I had given 15 years of my life to didn't drown because of other people's greed. For the first time since I walked out with my cardboard box, I felt ready to step back into Greenridge. Not as a forgotten ghost, but as the one who knew the whole story. I arrived at Greenridge Regional Medical Center 15 minutes early, just like I had for every meeting during my 15 years of service. The boardroom looked almost unchanged, polished oak table. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boulder's downtown skyline, but the air was different. Heavier, tense. Dr. Lewis and Dr. Patel greeted me with firm handshakes. Dr. Hayden gave a small relieved nod on the far side of the room. Kevin Laird sat stiffly, a laptop open in front of him, eyes flickering between his screen and the door, like he was expecting reinforcements. The chairman, Mr. Rourke, called the session to order. We're here to review recent IT disruptions and the circumstances surrounding the technology transition. He paused, glancing down the table. Mr. Mercer has graciously agreed to assist. I plugged in my laptop, projecting my prepared slides onto the main screen. 15 years of system evolution, I began calmly. Custom interfaces connecting 17 different platforms. Manual overrides in place for life-critical functions. Redundant backups designed to withstand natural disasters, ransomware, and human error. The first slide showed the hospital's system uptime rates, an uninterrupted series of green bars stretching back a decade. 99, 98% average uptime, zero critical failures. This isn't legacy inefficiency, I continued. This is reliability. These systems were built to prioritize patient care, not vendor branding. I moved to the next slide, a detailed cross-reference between Greenridge's infrastructure and Stratagem Technologies' proprietary platform. In bold red text were dozens of incompatibilities, pharmacy interfaces, radiology records, surgical scheduling databases. Kevin shifted uncomfortably but stayed silent. Stratagem's solution works best for new hospital builds, not for retrofitting complex environments like Greenridge, I explained. Their documentation, which I've highlighted here, warns of major integration risks with systems exactly like ours. I clicked again. A side-by-side comparison appeared: Greenridge's internal system audit from last year, compliant, efficient, low risk, versus Stratagem's efficiency assessment pushed through during Kevin's first month, riddled with exaggerated vulnerabilities and missing key metrics. According to these documents, I said, looking directly at the board, Greenridge's systems were misrepresented to justify an unnecessary transition. Finally, I pulled up one last file in an internal Stratagem email leaked anonymously to me by a former consultant. In it, project leaders openly discussed the bonus structure contingent on rapid migration, naming Kevin Laird as the internal sponsor. Murmurs filled the room. Kevin stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're taking the word of a disgruntled former employee over professional consultants. This is nothing but resentment. Dr. Patel leaned forward, steepling his fingers. We've diverted 72 emergency patients in the last 10 days, Kevin. Lost hundreds of thousands in revenue. Patient care has suffered. Dr. Lewis added coldly, this isn't about Daniel's feelings, it's about facts. You gambled with our hospital's core systems without full disclosure. The chairman turned to Kevin. Is there anything you'd like to say in your defense? Kevin opened his mouth, then closed it again. The board voted 20 minutes later, immediate termination of the Stratagem contract, full internal investigation into Kevin's actions, and an emergency recovery plan to restore the original systems. As I packed up my laptop, Mr. Rourke approached me. Daniel, he said, voice quieter now, we'd like to discuss a larger role for you if you're willing. I paused, glancing at the board members, the staff I'd once fought silently for, now watching with something close to respect. I'm listening, I said. 3 days later, I stood once again inside Greenridge's main server room. It was quieter than I remembered. The soft hum of machines muffled the blinking lights, fewer than they should have been. Stratagem's team had stripped out entire racks of hardware during their so-called modernization. Critical backup arrays had been decommissioned without equivalent replacements. Custom integration servers were either disconnected or incorrectly reconfigured. It wasn't just a mess, it was surgical sabotage. I took a deep breath and called the new team together. A handful of familiar faces: Alan from IT, Denise from databases, and a few fresh hires Jennifer Walsh had helped recruit from Pinecrest Network. We're not pointing fingers, I began. We're rebuilding for the hospital, for the patients, for the people depending on us to get this right. They nodded, grim-faced but determined. Over the next 2 weeks, we worked almost around the clock. Nights blurred into mornings. Coffee became currency. First, we identified and cataloged every damaged or missing subsystem. Then we mapped out dependencies, the hidden threads connecting pharmacy orders to patient records, linking imaging files to diagnostic histories, tying billing verification to surgical clearances. It wasn't glamorous work. It was painstaking, slow, sometimes infuriating, but it was necessary. On the 5th day, Alan flagged me down, found the backup to the scheduling server. The one you tucked behind the maintenance panel back in 2017, he said, grinning sheepishly. Still intact. Of course it is, I replied, clapping him on the back. Piece by piece, we restored what had been lost. Pharmacy systems began syncing again. ER admissions stopped bottlenecking. Radiology records reappeared on physician screens without error. We reinstalled the custom patches, rebuilt the legacy APIs, reinstituted the manual overrides for critical systems, the same ones Stratagem had ripped out. Convinced automation alone could handle every emergency. By the end of the second week, 98% of Greenridge's digital infrastructure was operational. And this time it was properly documented, mapped, and cross-validated with redundancy protocols for every vital function. On a crisp Friday morning, I stood outside the cardiology unit as Nurse Ramos, someone I'd known for years, waved me down. "Hey, Daniel," she called out, "records pulled up instantly today. No errors, no glitches. It's like it used to be." I smiled, a rare and genuine one. Good. That's how it should be. Word spread quickly throughout the hospital departments that had been drowning in chaos just days earlier were now operating with the kind of smoothness that only comes when systems are built not for flashy reports, but for the people using them. Greenridge wasn't flashy. It wasn't sleek or trendy, but it was alive again. Later that afternoon, the board held a special session to formally thank the recovery team. I stood at the back of the room listening as Mr. Rourke addressed the staff. Greenridge was built on the idea that patient care must never take a back seat to profit or expediency. He said, "Thanks to the efforts of Mr. Mercer and his team, we're not just restoring our systems, we're restoring that founding principle." Applause broke out, genuine, unforced. I felt something settle deep in my chest, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying finally lift. We hadn't just reclaimed Greenridge's systems, we had reclaimed its heartbeat. Greenridge wasn't content just to recover. The board made it clear they wanted to rebuild smarter, not with reckless speed or hollow buzzwords, but with deliberate strength, real modernization rooted in the hard lessons of the past few months. At their request, I drafted a 5-year technology roadmap. The first phase focused on shoring up vulnerabilities. We would upgrade aging hardware, bolster cybersecurity frameworks, and install additional redundancies for critical systems like pharmacy dispensing and surgical scheduling. Nothing flashy, nothing headline-grabbing, just quiet, methodical reinforcement where it mattered most. The second phase involved thoughtful modernization, not rip and replace, but selective evolution. Introducing cloud-based backups, secondary not primary, gradual migration of non-critical applications like HR, and billing to modern platforms while preserving the custom clinical systems that define Greenridge's care model. The third phase envisioned careful integration of emerging technologies, AI-driven diagnostic tools, remote patient monitoring systems, but only after exhaustive testing pilot programs and staff training. Each step would be measured not in buzzwords achieved, but in lives protected. I presented the plan in a packed boardroom, the same place where months earlier I'd stood defending a dying system. But this time, the reception was different. Dr. Patel leaned forward, studying the roadmap. "This is sustainable," he said, "not just another gamble." Dr. Hayden added, "It respects what we built without clinging to it blindly." Mr. Rourke, the chairman, closed the meeting with a rare smile. "You have our full support, Mr. Mercer. Let's do this right." And so we began. The months that followed were some of the hardest and some of the most rewarding of my career. Every department had a seat at the table. Every upgrade plan was discussed not just with IT staff, but with nurses, doctors, lab techs, the people who would actually use the systems daily. We set up pilot programs for each new implementation. We ran drills simulating power failures, cyber attacks, mass casualty events. We caught mistakes early, adjusted where needed, and celebrated small victories without losing sight of the larger goal. Slowly, a new culture emerged at Greenridge, one where technology wasn't an abstract force imposed from above, but a living, breathing part of patient care shaped by those who knew the stakes best. In April, the State Healthcare Commission conducted a surprise inspection. Their report cited Greenridge's new technology initiative as a model for balancing innovation with patient safety. 2 months later, Greenridge received an award from the Colorado Health Network for excellence in healthcare IT resilience, the first in its history. At the awards dinner, I stood quietly at the back of the banquet hall, sipping bad coffee from a paper cup, while hospital leadership accepted the plaque. I didn't need a spotlight. I didn't need applause. It was enough to know that this time we hadn't just modernized. We had strengthened the very foundation of what made Greenridge worth saving. As I left the banquet, the summer night wrapped around me, warm, quiet, steady. The road ahead would still be long. Technology never stood still, but now neither did we. We moved forward thoughtfully, carefully, purposefully, exactly the way it should have been all along. 6 months after the last system restoration, I stood once again in Greenridge's main lobby. But this time, not as a ghost walking through familiar halls, not as a forgotten figure moving in the background. I stood there as someone whose work had been seen recognized and, most importantly, valued. The hospital's quarterly review had just wrapped system uptime, exceeded 99%, the highest in Greenridge's history. Patient intake efficiency had improved by 12%. Staff satisfaction surveys cited reliable technology as one of the top improvements in workplace quality. More importantly, the chaos that had once threatened to drown this place had faded into a quiet, steady rhythm of care. Technology wasn't the star. It was the heartbeat humming beneath everything exactly the way it should be. As I gathered my notes to leave, Dr. Hayden approached with a small plaque wrapped in blue ribbon. She smiled as she handed it to me. For your unwavering dedication to the unseen foundations of patient care, the inscription read, Greenridge Regional Medical Center, in gratitude. I swallowed hard against the lump rising in my throat. It wasn't about the plaque itself, it was what it represented. That finally someone understood that resilience doesn't happen by accident. That progress without respect for what works is just another form of destruction. That sometimes the most radical thing you can do is protect what already keeps people safe. On the drive home, I thought about the last year, about the lessons carved out of exhaustion, frustration, and ultimately perseverance. Experience matters, not because it clings to the past, but because it carries the silent wisdom of knowing what mistakes cost when real lives are involved. True innovation respects foundations. It doesn't discard the old for the sake of the new. It builds carefully atop what is strong, what has endured storms before. Recognition isn't about ego. It's about being part of something bigger than yourself and knowing your work, even the invisible work, matters. Most importantly, loyalty should never be mistaken for weakness. Those who stand quietly in the background, keeping systems alive without fanfare, are often the ones carrying the weight of entire communities. I pulled into my driveway, the mountains dark against the fading light, and sat for a moment longer in the car. Not in regret, not in bitterness. In peace, Sornato. I had fought the quiet battles, had defended the fragile systems no one else even noticed until they broke. Had been cast aside and returned not for revenge, but for the sake of truth. And in doing so, I had reclaimed something more important than a title or a paycheck. I had reclaimed my place, my voice, my legacy. The next morning, I pinned the Greenridge plaque on the wall of my home office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Experience is never obsolete. Quiet resilience is never wasted. Integrity is never in vain. Some lessons take years to bloom, like seeds planted deep beneath the noise. But when they do, they change not just careers, but entire lives. And if even one person, one leader, one doctor, one nurse remembers that quiet work matters, then everything I fought for was worth it.